You don't need to visit ancient Egypt to discover megaliths from the dawn of time. Today I'm taking you on a tour of America's ancient megastructures, revealing the truth of a forgotten civilization that predates the flood. The impossible Sage Wall. There is a very big and very mysterious wall deep in the remote wilderness of Montana that challenges every notion scientists have about human history. It's been called an impossible structure. Some scholars believe it's proof of a pre-flood civilization, one that was home to experts in advanced engineering. But is it true? To be convinced, you must see it for yourself. A walk through the remote Montana forest brings you to the Sage Wall, as it's called, and your jaw drops instantly. The megalithic structure looks so out of place in the forest that you struggle to understand what you're looking at. The Sage Wall extends 275 feet through the trees in a straight line. It reaches more than 25 feet high in some places. But what a lot of visitors don't realize is that the Sage Wall is like an iceberg. It's believed to continue 15 feet below the ground. This means almost half the wall is buried. Assuming it hadn't always been buried, the wall originally stood at least 40 feet tall. Who in the world could have built this thing? When you stand there looking at the Sage Wall, you get an overwhelming sense that somebody built it a long, long time ago, even before Native Americans. Although it looks like the kind of wall you would see in a medieval castle with huge stone blocks stacked one upon the other, it is clearly more ancient than anything from the Middle Ages. The Sage Wall is also made of sturdier stuff. Some of the blocks weigh an impossible 91 tons. Can you explain to me how any pre-industrial civilization carved, transported, and stacked 91-ton blocks? Not even scientists can figure it out, which is likely why most mainstream archaeologists have denounced the Sage Wall as a fraud. Let's back all the way up to its initial discovery. Many years ago, landowners Christopher Borton and Linda Welsh were clearing their heavily forested property when they found the wall. They recognized that it looked like other mysterious megalithic structures from places like Egypt and Peru. Dr. Samir Osmanagic, known for his groundbreaking work studying the Bosnian pyramid, was invited to study the site. The doctor noted that the wall has special magnetic properties and that it appears to be aligned with the winter solstice. Dr. Osmanagic said the structure could predate the Ice Age. The significance of the Sage Wall should not be underestimated. There are only a few other structures like it in the USA. They all look like they were built by giants a million years ago. Yet scientists dismiss them as natural formations. As I explore more of America's most ancient places today, you'll see how these megaliths are all connected. And by the end of the video, you might be convinced that America's real history is not in your high school textbooks. America's Stonehenge. America has its own Stonehenge, and you can see it for yourself right now. You just need to drive to Salem, New Hampshire. That's not to be confused with Salem, Massachusetts, where America's most famous witch trials were held. The American Stonehenge might be an even bigger mystery than Stonehenge in England. The site is about 30 acres and covered in strange stone formations that scientists have never been able to figure out. One of the weirder attractions is the sacrificial stone, which some say was used for blood rituals. The sacrificial stone is lying flat, slightly elevated on 4 blocks like a bed frame set on loose bricks. It's almost the perfect size for a fully grown man or woman to stretch out on it. Grooves etched into the flat stone look as if they were used to channel blood. This horrible stone may have seen countless ancient deaths. The sacrificed victim would have been bled dry, their blood funneled along the grooves and into clay pots. What happened next is something I'm not sure I want to know. Then again, the sacrificial stone may not have even been used in sacrifices. Some experts say it was a cider press, which is in fact a popular tool used by colonial farmers in New England. Instead of collecting blood, the grooves on the table may have collected cider. Which do you think is more likely, that the stone table was used in blood sacrifices or for making delicious cider? This is the root of America's Stonehenge's problem. Experts can't agree on anything. Some say the stone remnants are from farmers in the 18th century. Others claim the stonework is pre-Columbian, possibly dating to before the Ice Age, just like the Sage Wall in Montana. Then there's archaeologist David Starbuck, who said America's Stonehenge was likely created by William Goodwin. Now here's where the story really goes off the rails. In 1937, William Goodwin purchased the area. William became convinced that the caves and stone ruins were the remnants of Irish monks who arrived in America centuries before the arrival of Christopher Columbus. William was so convinced that Irish monks had built a crude monastery in the New Hampshire forest that he started rearranging the stones to fit his theory. Now keep in mind that before William purchased the site, the stones had already been moved around because there was a bit of mining going on. The stones were moved so much that most of them are no longer in their original spot. Some of the stones still have drill marks from when this site was a quarry. This is bad news, but it doesn't discount the site as a fake. In 1982, David Stuart Smith conducted an excavation. His excavation was done under the supervision of a New Hampshire state archaeologist. Everything was recorded and done by the books. Can you guess what David found? He uncovered chips and flakes of stone proving that the site was used by Native Americans for manufacturing tools 2,000 years ago. The remains of a Native American wigwam were also found, along with 2 fire pits and a canoe. The canoe was carved only 300 years ago. Even more exciting was years later when archaeologists conducted a radiocarbon analysis of charcoal at the site. The analysis proved people were living at America's Stonehenge 4,000 years ago. That was 2 millennia before the Native Americans. The scientific tests prove that William did not fake America's Stonehenge. He may have moved the stones to make them more believable, but they are ancient. The question remaining is, how ancient? Did you know famous author H.P. Lovecraft, the inventor of Cthulhu, was a big enthusiast of the megaliths in New England? They inspired a lot of his writing. Lovecraft even visited America's Stonehenge at some point between 1928 and the 1930s. Fans of his work believe the site inspired one of his most beloved works, the Dunwich Horror. And here's another thing you might want to know. Professor Barry Fell at the Harvard Museum of Comparative Zoology published a book in 1976 in which he made some incredible claims. Barry said America's Stonehenge has Phoenician inscriptions, only they're written in Ogham, which is an old Irish script. The Nazca Lines of California. Just like America has its own Stonehenge, America also has its own version of the Nazca Lines, which of course are one of Peru's top mysteries. In California, there are over 200 geoglyphs that scientists have been trying to decipher for decades. Experts don't know who made the American geoglyphs or when, but all signs point to an ancient civilization. They are known as the Blythe intaglios, a couple hundred enormous geoglyphs of human and animal figures. Just like in Peru, the Californian glyphs are drawn on the ground. The best way to see them is from out the window of an airplane. In fact, you could walk right over the geoglyphs and not even realize it. Scientists have never been able to understand how ancient societies completed such complex works of art without being able to see the full picture. It's like drawing a 200-foot-long canvas blind. You can see the mystery for yourself in the Colorado desert, about 15 miles north of Blythe. Radiocarbon tests have placed the geoglyphs at being made around 900 BC, which would make them 3,000 years old. However, things are not always as they appear. Some have theorized that the geoglyphs were created by a civilization 10,000 years ago. That would make them antediluvian, pre-flood creations. Yet again, what you and I are talking about here is possible evidence of a widespread civilization in North America. The glyphs, the stone ruins, the sage wall, it all points to an intelligent culture. One that may have been wiped out by a catastrophe, possibly the biblical flood. Mainstream historians believe the Blythe intaglios were made by the Mojave Native Americans between 450 and 2,000 years ago. Mainstream historians claim that the bizarre figures etched into the Colorado desert represent the supreme deity, Mastamho. But here's the thing about that. The radiocarbon dating already proves the glyphs predate the people of the Mojave by 1,000 years. As for the theory about Mastamho, it just doesn't fit. The bizarre figures could be representations of something not altogether human. To be straight with you, the geoglyphs look like massive sketches of aliens. I have another problem with the timeline put forward by mainstream archaeologists. Alongside the geoglyphs that look like aliens are geoglyphs of horses. These should not be here. When you think about the American West, I'm sure horses are in the picture. But you might not know that horses didn't arrive in California until 1540 with the Spanish conquistadors. There were horses in California before the Spanish, but it was a while ago. American horses have been extinct for over 10,000 years. So how did geoglyphs allegedly made 2,000 years ago show animals that weren't even on the continent at that time? The pieces don't fit together. They just don't make sense. All evidence points to the geoglyphs being pre-flood. And now for a quick break, but first I wanted to give a shout out and big thank you to Brett Venice and Ben Diericu for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Medicine wheel or something stranger. The Bighorn medicine wheel in Wyoming is either 220 years old, 1,000 years old, or more than 3,000 years old. Even though historians say it was built by Native Americans, not everyone is convinced, leading to some very controversial opinions. Sitting at an elevation of almost 10,000 feet above sea level, the Bighorn medicine wheel kind of looks like a giant clock at the top of Medicine Mountain. It's roughly circular, about 82 feet in diameter, and at its center is a massive stone cairn. Extending from the central cairn are 28 radial lines like the spokes of a wheel, hence the name. Those are its physical features, but what exactly is the wheel? According to oral histories passed down through generations of Native Americans, the medicine wheel is very, very old. It's a sort of cosmological checkpoint, a sacred place by which people could orient their movements. It was also used as an altar, like an open-air church. Ancient tribes would gather at the wheel to perform spiritual rituals and hold communal festivals. This is what oral tradition tells us, but is it true? The biggest problem archaeologists have is trying to pinpoint an exact date for when the wheel was made. There's only been a single reliable scientific date pulled from the ruins of the wheel. Scientists analyzed a small sample of wood and found that it came from 1760, which would make the medicine wheel surprisingly young, only a bit more than 2 centuries old. Native American tradition claims the wheel has been visited for at least 7,000 years longer than that. Which date is correct? To help make up your mind of what you should believe, let me direct your attention to Alberta, Canada. The province is home to the earliest confirmed medicine wheel in the world. It's 5,500 years old. There's no doubt that medicine wheels were used long before ancient Egypt ever existed. But how far back in time do they go? Some historians think medicine wheels predate Native American tribes. Could the wheels have already marked the landscape when Native Americans found them? America's sunken Stonehenge. If you were surprised to learn about America's Stonehenge, wait until you hear about America's sunken Stonehenge. There is a bizarre formation on the bottom of Lake Michigan that is almost identical to Stonehenge in Britain. Mark Holley is a professor of underwater archaeology at Northwestern Michigan University. He was looking for shipwrecks in Grand Traverse Bay when he came across something that changed his life forever. In the murky gloom of the lake, Mark found a rock with a prehistoric carving on it. The carving looked to be of a mastodon, a prehistoric elephant. It was the beginning of something incredible. Mark then found another stone and then another stone. Soon he realized he was swimming through a stone circle from the Ice Age, and not just a little stone circle either. This is one of the biggest and oldest structures ever found in North America. I have to ask, how did one of the most important megalithic sites in all of America end up 40 feet beneath a lake? Who built it? Who left it there? And where are they now? The stone circle is made up of 2 concentric rings of tall standing stones. The outer ring is roughly 40 feet in diameter. The inner ring is 20 feet in diameter. Each stone is big and made of solid granite. Oh yeah, and the stone circle is 9,000 years old. The age should blow your mind, regardless of whether the stone circle is submerged or not. To give you an idea of just how ancient this place is, Stonehenge wouldn't become a thought in someone's brain for another 4,000 years. I want to show you a sonar image of the stones so that you can see what's left of them at the bottom of the lake. Isn't that amazing to see? The picture is courtesy of Creative Commons. Mark Holley said some of the stones are the size of a car. Mark also said some of the stones extend beyond the central circle. There appears to be a different formation of stones arranged in a straight line more than a mile long. Could this be a wall? Is it the remnants of a road? Let me know what you think in the comments. Sadly, this is where the good news ends. It pains me to say that many archaeological experts have refused to investigate the site. It's being downright ignored by archaeologists. This comes as a major shock since America's sunken Stonehenge is so close to home. What is stopping researchers from taking a short road trip to investigate what might be the most important structure on the continent? What are they afraid to find out? The unsolvable maze. No one has ever been able to find their way out of Hemet Maze. Can you? In 1914, a California rancher outside the small town of Hemet was surveying his property when he discovered something amazing. I mean, really amazing. One of the most important archaeological treasures in the country. What he found was a maze carved into a boulder. Archaeologists later came to inspect the maze and determined it to be 500 years old. But there's a catch. There's always a catch. The archaeologists weren't able to date the maze itself. Instead, they dated some artifacts found near the stone and assumed both things were the same age. You know what they say about assumptions. The maze could, in theory, be 10,000 years older than archaeologists say it is. The nearby tools could have nothing to do with the stone. Native Americans may have visited the maze 500 years ago and left some of their belongings behind. As of right now, archaeologists don't have a clue what's going on with the Hemet Maze stone. Not just because they don't know how old it is, but because they can't figure out who made it. The design is wildly different from any other petroglyph ever found in the United States of America. Not just America. Hemet Maze is different from any other petroglyph ever found, period. Most petroglyphs around the globe are stylized pictures of animals, spirits, people, and sometimes things that look like aliens. Ancient indigenous groups from the wilds of America to the outback of Australia created beautiful petroglyphs based on what they saw in their daily lives. They didn't draw labyrinths. You're going to be very surprised in about 3 seconds when I tell you the Hemet Maze is carved in the shape of a swastika. How does any of this make a lick of sense? I know that the swastika symbol brings to mind Nazis, but let's look past the Nazis to the origin of the swastika, which can be found in Buddhist tradition. Swastikas are commonly found throughout Asia, anywhere that Buddhism took root. If you visited somewhere like India or Thailand, you will have noticed ancient swastikas carved onto the walls of temples. The symbol predates the Nazis of World War II by a couple thousand years, but that doesn't explain how it found its way onto a labyrinth in California. One theory is that Chinese sailors were shipwrecked in California 1,500 years ago. Considering the sailors were most likely all men, it's doubtful they started a new civilization. The sailors may have lived their final days on the California coast, then left the labyrinth as a Bob was here kind of deal. Or this could be completely wrong. The maze could be prehistoric, antediluvian, pre-flood. Maybe aliens touched down 10,000 years ago, drew the maze on the rock for fun, and got back into their spaceships and left. It's not that the maze is unsolvable, it's that the maze's origin is too mysterious to figure out. The other ancient walls of America, Texas, California, and Montana, are all home to ancient walls that shouldn't exist. Montana has its megalithic wall in the forest. In Texas, the city of Rockwall is hiding an underground rock wall that has been the source of a heated debate for 160 years. Natural or man-made? Those are the two sides of the argument that rages to this very day. As you may have guessed, the city of Rockwall was named after its legendary rock wall. Beneath the city is a long line of hard mineral stones that look like worn bricks. It appears as though there was once a wall running through town, but it was buried eons ago. Now the stone is so worn that it's nearly indistinguishable from dirt. Of course, modern geologists say the rock wall is nothing but dirt. Dirt, dirt, and more dirt. In 1852, locals were so convinced that they'd stumbled upon prehistoric ruins that they conducted an excavation. The records of the dig are kept in the archives of the Rockwall County Historical Foundation. To date, the rock wall has turned up in 11 different locations across the city. 11 different spots. Let's just break down the significance of that for a second. Multiple locations mean the wall isn't just preserved in one crumbling section. It zigzags around the city almost like a labyrinth, like a huge maze. I wonder if there's some obscure connection between the rock wall in Texas and the labyrinth in California. What are your thoughts on that? Far from Texas, in Berkeley, on the eastern shore of the San Francisco Bay, there are even more mysterious walls. More mysterious as in there are more of them, and their origin is just as baffling as the rock walls in Texas. The remnants of these old stone walls can be seen fairly easily, so it's not unimaginable that you could go on an adventure to find them. They run through the hills surrounding the Bay Area, extending all the way to Red Bluff, Montague, and Chico. In some spots, the walls are sturdy, more than 3 feet high, and wide enough you wouldn't want to try jumping to the other side. Some sections are crumbled and broken. Some spots are poorly built, as if the architects were too lazy and piled a bunch of loose stones together. Then there are the good spots. Entire lengths of wall were carefully constructed without using any type of mortar. These more impressive sections seem to have sunk deep into the earth, suggesting they were initially much taller. This reminds me of the sage wall I told you about at the beginning of the video, which could be more than 15 feet deep. It's like the earth is trying to eat what little remains of the ancient walls. The million-dollar question is, who built the mystery walls of the East Bay? And the $2 million question is, when was the buried rock wall of Texas built? There isn't a scientist in the world who can answer either question. The extent of the rock wall in Texas has never been discovered. No one knows how big it is. Sections of it appear every now and again, always looking identical, like the rough passages of a buried maze. In California, the mystery walls could be as old as civilization itself. There is no written documentation from European settlers to prove that they built the walls. Some historians think it was the Ohlone Native American people of the California coast who built them. If you have any theories, please share them in the comments. America is a graveyard for giants. Before Spanish conquistadors, before the Puritan exiles and the Salem witch trials, and before the Iroquois, Hurons, or Omahas, there were giants in North America. The Nephilim walked the earth, and the proof is out there. How many times do you think a giant skeleton has been found buried in a megalithic mound in North America? Mainstream science and the current archaeological narrative say 0. Yet historical records say the real number is closer to 1,000. Local newspapers, scientific journals, county histories, and even reports from the Smithsonian document these shocking discoveries. Some scholars call it the giant skeleton craze of the 20th century. From Washington state to the tip of Florida, giant human skeletons over 7 feet tall were pulled out of huge artificial mounds of dirt. This happened coast to coast. It's documented in almost every single state. Just take a look at this map of giant discoveries reported in North America. Credit for the map goes to C. Hall. Isn't that crazy? Look at how many tiny purple human markers are on the map. They seem to be concentrated the most in the Ohio-Pennsylvania region close to Lake Erie, but as you can see, they're spread across the entire continent. In 1873, the Smithsonian Institution's annual report claimed that a giant human skeleton was found in Anna, Illinois. It was 8 feet tall and had a skull 36 inches in circumference. To put that into perspective, the average adult human skull is roughly 20 inches in circumference. That is a huge difference. These giants weren't just tall, they must have had oversized brains too. Smithsonian scientists identified at least 17 giant skeletons in their annual reports. Those skeletons are now gone. In fact, they're all gone. All the monstrous skeletons that were dug out of their graves disappeared a long time ago. Some of them were removed from where they were on display in scientific institutes. A lot of them were repatriated under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. But where did they all go? It's almost as if the American government sent a cleanup crew of secret Men in Black agents to destroy every last piece of physical evidence that giants existed. Scholars don't think these skeletons even belonged to Native Americans. For one, they weren't always overtly human. For example, some of the skulls boasted elongated skulls, just like the mysterious mummies found in Paracas, Peru. The Paracas mummies have been called aliens because of their elongated heads. Some scientists scientists have suggested the Paracas mummies were human-alien hybrids, possibly even the descendants of the Nephilim from the Bible. The Paracas mummies were of ordinary human height. So if the Paracas mummies were the descendants of the giant Nephilim, what does that make the extra-large skeletons of America? It would make them the original Nephilim, standing more than 7 feet tall, with huge oblong heads. Their skulls were like traffic pylons or like dunce caps. If you're feeling overwhelmed, that's perfectly normal. It's just everything you ever thought you knew about humanity rearranging itself. Now let's explore a few of the megaliths where the giant skeletons were discovered. In 1959 in West Virginia, Dr. Donald Dragoo from Carnegie Museum excavated the Cressup Mound. He unearthed a skeleton standing more than 7 feet tall. The same thing was found during an excavation of Serpent Mound, Ohio, in the 1890s. Professor Frederick Ward Putnam excavated the prehistoric mound, which by the way is shaped like a long twisting serpent, and discovered skeletons. Some skeletons were 6 feet tall, some were 7 feet tall, and there may have been a few even closer to 8 feet tall. Here's a picture, a postcard actually, of one of the giant skeletons cut off at the knees, courtesy of Jeffrey Wilson. Notice the print on the picture claiming the skeleton to be that of a mound builder. It used to be common knowledge that the mound builders of prehistoric America stood more than 7 feet tall. These were the people, or possibly Nephilim, who built Serpent Mound, the Iowa Mounds, the Steelville Mounds, and the mounds of the Channel Islands. The list goes on and on. What I want to know is, what happened that changed everything? Why does it seem that scientists confiscated and eliminated every single giant skeleton ever found in America? They were like murderers trying to cover up a crime scene. I'm also a little curious about something, and I think you might be too. Could the giants have been the ones behind the Sage Wall and other American megaliths? The castle in the cliff. Tucked away in a corner of the stark Arizona desert is an ancient castle in the cliffs. You might not believe me when I tell you what the ancient 5-story building was used for. If you've ever been to Arizona, you know that it's dry. But more than 500 years ago, the Sinagua people were bombarded by floodwaters. To stop their village from floating away, they constructed a miniature town inside the nook of a cliff. And it's amazingly still standing today. I'm talking about Montezuma Castle, a monumental structure with more than 20 rooms spread across its 5 levels. And although it's called Montezuma Castle, it has no relation to the ancient Aztec emperor Montezuma. It was the Europeans who discovered the ruins in the 1860s and mistook it for something built by the Aztec. In reality, the castle was built by the Sinagua. The mysterious culture thrived in this part of Arizona thanks to the annual flooding of Beaver Creek. Each summer during the monsoon season, the creek flooded and inundated the adjacent floodplain. This boosted the Sinagua's agricultural yields but wiped out their towns. Their solution was to live in the cliffs. It was pretty genius if you ask me. And it worked for centuries. Scientists think the population here peaked in 1300 AD, with an estimated 50 people living inside Montezuma Castle. There were likely other cliff castles around, but they've been destroyed or haven't been found yet. Then something strange happened. All of a sudden, the cliff dwellers of Arizona disappeared. They left their hanging castles deserted, and nobody knows where they went. Will Dighton Rock ever be deciphered? Dighton Rock is trying to tell us something, but what? The alien carvings on this mysterious stone were made by someone or something prior to 1680. But what exactly the 40-ton note says is an enigma that may never be solved. In 1680, John Danforth was a new Harvard graduate. He had just finished studying at one of the most prestigious schools in the world. The point being that John had an eye for history. When he visited the town of Dighton in Massachusetts, he spotted a rock with some unusual carvings on it. This was in an age before pictures. If you saw something and wanted to remember it forever, you had to pull out a piece of paper and a pencil and draw it. That was precisely what John did. His original drawing of the Dighton Rock and its unusual etchings is now in the collection of the British Museum. John thought the squiggles and human shapes depicted a battle with visitors from the sea. Others think there's something more world-shattering at play here. In the 18th century, theologian Ezra Stiles claimed the stone to be proof of a visit from ancient Phoenicians. That's a bombshell and a half. Remember earlier in the video when I told you about Professor Barry Fell? He was the one who claimed the Phoenicians built America's Stonehenge. Could the Phoenicians of ancient Carthage have truly found their way to America? It's certainly a possibility. Danish historian Carl Christian Raffen had a different theory though. He was convinced that Dighton Rock was carved by Vikings. Professor Edmund Delabar from Brown University was convinced that the carvings were Portuguese in origin. Nobody can agree. More recent theories include everything from a lost Japanese voyage to the Native Americans documenting an alien encounter. Maybe you can decipher Dighton Rock's cryptic message. You can see it for yourself in the small museum inside the Dighton Rock State Park. Do you believe the history books of America need to change? Let me know what you think in the comments, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and come back again soon for more amazing videos.